It usually starts with silence, not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind that sits between two people who used to understand each other without words. You say goodnight, but there's no warmth in her voice anymore. You reach for her hand, and she pretends not to notice. The same woman who once texted you paragraphs now replies with single words. You tell yourself she's just tired, stressed, busy, but deep down you know something sacred has shifted. The rhythm that once connected you has broken, and no amount of effort can bring it back. Men often miss the moment it's over because we're built to fix things. We stay long after the damage is clear, believing loyalty will heal what love has already abandoned. But relationships don't end in explosions. They erode in silence. They die slowly, through 1,000 small betrayals of respect, until one day you realize you're arguing with a ghost. You're fighting for attention that no longer wants to be caught. The truth most men ignore is this: when a woman loses respect for you, the relationship is finished, no matter how much love you think is left. Respect is the oxygen that keeps attraction alive. Once it's gone, everything else suffocates. You'll notice it in subtle ways first. She interrupts you in public. She corrects you over trivial things. She rolls her eyes when you speak. These aren't accidents. They're signals that she no longer sees you as someone to look up to, but someone to manage, to correct, to test. And every time you stay silent to keep the peace, you teach her that your peace is negotiable. You can't love your way back into respect. That's the mistake men make again and again. You try to prove your worth through kindness, generosity, patience, and all it does is confirm her dominance. You become her emotional servant while she becomes your judge. And judges don't fall in love with the accused. When the polarity flips, when the man starts chasing and the woman starts evaluating, desire disappears. It's biological. It's psychological. It's inevitable. What makes this dynamic so cruel is that it doesn't start that way. At first, she was fascinated by your strength, your independence, your self-direction. She admired the way you didn't need her to feel complete. But somewhere along the way, you traded your edge for comfort. You stopped leading with purpose and started seeking permission. You began asking instead of deciding, explaining instead of asserting, negotiating instead of standing firm. That's when she began to withdraw. Not because she stopped loving you, but because she stopped feeling safe in your leadership. The hardest truth to accept is that women don't fall out of love. They fall out of admiration. And when admiration dies, affection follows. Once she can predict every word you'll say, every reaction you'll have, every apology you'll make, the mystery is gone. And when there's no mystery, there's no magnetism. You've become emotionally transparent, and she's already writing your eulogy while you're still trying to fix the cracks. But this isn't about blaming her. It's about seeing yourself clearly. Because the moment a woman feels she can disrespect you without consequence, the countdown begins. It doesn't matter how many good memories you share. Once she stops seeing you as a man she can follow, she starts seeing you as a project she needs to correct. And no man survives being loved like a problem. That's the moment most men need to walk away, but don't. Because walking away feels like failure. You think leaving means you gave up too soon. But sometimes leaving is the most powerful act of self-respect you'll ever perform. It's the declaration that you won't keep negotiating your value with someone who's already decided it. There's a version of you that only appears when you're trying to save something that's already dying. You start over-analyzing every text, rewriting your sentences, rehearsing what to say so she won't get distant again. You begin to shrink yourself, your opinions, your energy, your confidence, all in the name of keeping her comfortable. You tell yourself it's love, but it's not. It's survival. You've started orbiting around her moods instead of your mission, and that's the moment a man quietly disappears. Not from her life, but from his own. Men lose themselves slowly. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small compromises that feel harmless at first. You stop going to the gym because she wants more time together. You stop seeing your friends because she feels insecure. You stop speaking your mind because you're tired of the arguments. And before you know it, you're living a life designed entirely around avoiding her disapproval. You've become the ghost of the man she once fell for, not because you changed too little, but because you changed too much. Here's what no one tells you. A woman cannot truly love a man she doesn't respect, and she cannot respect a man who betrays himself for her comfort. The very sacrifices you make to prove your love are the things that destroy her attraction. The harder you try to earn what should be freely given, the faster she loses interest. Because love that requires begging isn't love. It's dependency disguised as devotion. The moment you find yourself defending your worth to the person who's supposed to see it effortlessly, that's when it's time to walk away. Not because you stopped caring, but because caring too much for someone who no longer values you is self-harm. Staying becomes a slow suicide of your confidence. You start believing her moods are reflections of your worth. You chase validation like oxygen, hoping that one good day will erase 100 bad ones. But it never does. Because the problem isn't your effort, it's her detachment. Women test men not to destroy them, but to measure the strength of their foundation. But when those tests become constant, cruel, and manipulative, they're no longer tests, they're punishments. You start realizing she doesn't want peace, she wants power. Every apology becomes an offering, every compromise a small surrender. And no matter how much you give, it's never enough. Because what she's chasing isn't love, it's control. There's a certain type of woman who thrives on chaos because chaos keeps her in control. As long as you're unsteady, unsure, and emotionally reactive, she feels secure. The irony is cruel. She creates the instability she claims to hate. She'll say, "I just want honesty," but punish you for telling the truth. She'll say, "I want a man who takes charge, but fight you every time you do." These contradictions aren't random, they're patterns of emotional dominance, and if you stay long enough, you'll internalize them. You'll start believing her logic is normal, but love isn't supposed to feel like strategy. You shouldn't have to study her moods like weather forecasts just to survive the week. You shouldn't have to trade your dignity for temporary peace. That's not partnership, that's psychological erosion. The longer you stay, the less you'll recognize yourself, because her control doesn't begin with what she takes from you. It begins with what you willingly give away. There comes a point when you must decide, do you want to be understood by her or respected by yourself? Because sometimes you can't have both. And the day you finally choose your own peace over her approval is the day you reclaim your power. There's a reason men stay long after they know they should leave. It's not weakness, it's wiring. Men are conditioned to endure. From childhood, we're taught that pain means persistence, that loyalty is proof of strength, that quitting is failure. So when the woman you love begins to wound you, your instinct isn't to run, it's to hold on tighter. You mistake suffering for commitment. You tell yourself, real men don't give up. But there's a difference between fighting for love and fighting for someone who no longer fights for you.
What most men don't realize is that every time you stay in a relationship that violates your peace, you're teaching your nervous system that chaos is normal. You start confusing anxiety with excitement. You start believing that love must come with pain. And the longer you remain in that storm, the more your body associates instability with intimacy. It's psychological conditioning. You're addicted to the highs and lows. The same way gamblers stay at the table after losing everything, you keep playing emotional roulette, hoping the next spin will land on love again. But love that requires constant convincing isn't love, it's emotional debt. You keep paying in apologies, in explanations, in endless patience, but the balance never clears. Every small reconciliation feels like a victory until you realize it's just the reset button on another cycle of disrespect. You begin anticipating peace like a luxury, something you have to earn. That's how far gone you've drifted. When peace becomes conditional, there's a moment every man hits, sometimes quietly in the shower, sometimes alone in his car, when he realizes he's not even trying to be loved anymore. He's just trying not to be abandoned. That's when you've crossed from love into survival mode. You measure her affection by the absence of punishment. You find yourself grateful for neutrality, for moments when she's not angry, not cold, not cruel. But that's not love. That's trauma bonding, mistaking the absence of chaos for the presence of care.
You'll know you've reached the breaking point when you start talking to yourself more than you talk to her, when you rehearse conversations that never happen, when you wake up already exhausted, not from work but from walking on emotional glass, when you start realizing that the man in the mirror looks like someone who's lost everything except his endurance. That's the danger of staying too long. It doesn't just drain you, it reshapes you. You start dimming your light to fit her comfort zone. You stop laughing the way you used to. You stop dreaming the way you used to. You become a quieter version of yourself, and she doesn't even notice. Men rarely leave because they stop loving. They leave because staying would mean losing what's left of themselves. But leaving requires a kind of strength most people will never understand, because it's not physical. It's spiritual. It's walking away from the familiar pain that once felt like home. It's breaking the addiction to being needed, even when that need was built on dysfunction. It's saying, I still love you, but I love my peace more. The world won't applaud you for it. She might call you cold, your friends might call you crazy, and society might tell you to work it out. But what they don't feel is the slow death that comes from living in emotional captivity. Because every man who stays too long learns the same truth in the end, that peace is not negotiable, and love that demands your self-destruction is not love at all. There's always a moment, subtle, quiet, and almost sacred, when something inside you shifts. It's not rage, it's not heartbreak, it's clarity. You stop arguing, you stop explaining, you stop needing her to understand what she keeps pretending not to see. You realize she was never misunderstanding you, she just never cared to understand. And for the first time, instead of begging to be heard, you start listening to yourself. That's the beginning of freedom. This moment doesn't feel like power at first, it feels like grief. Because walking away isn't just leaving her, it's leaving behind the version of yourself that tolerated what you didn't deserve. It's mourning the man who kept trying, who kept hoping, who kept believing that love could fix what respect had already buried. It's the quiet acceptance that sometimes closure never comes in words. It comes in silence, in distance, in peace. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop bleeding for someone who won't stop cutting. You stop volunteering for pain. You stop chasing explanations that won't change anything. You learn to sit with the discomfort of not knowing why, and you begin to realize that you don't need to. The truth is, the more time you spend trying to understand someone's chaos, the further you drift from your own clarity. Some people aren't puzzles to solve, they're storms to walk away from. The moment you stop chasing, the dynamic collapses. The power she once held over you evaporates the second your attention no longer fuels her ego. Because women who thrive on control aren't addicted to your love, they're addicted to your reaction. When you stop reacting, you starve the drama. You take away the emotional oxygen that keeps the fire alive. That's why silence after chaos is so powerful. It's the sound of a man reclaiming control. But walking away isn't an act of anger. It's an act of alignment. It's choosing truth over comfort, self-respect over attachment, peace over potential. Because potential is what traps most men. The fantasy of who she could be, if only she changed. You fall in love with her potential while suffering from her reality. But potential without accountability is poison. And every time you tell yourself she'll change, you extend your own suffering. Change isn't something you wait for, it's something you witness. And if it's not visible, it's not real. Leaving isn't about punishing her. It's about protecting you. It's about recognizing that peace isn't a luxury. It's a boundary. And boundaries are how a man reclaims his sense of self after years of erosion. The first boundary is silence. The second is distance. The third is indifference. These aren't cold responses, they're necessary ones. Because emotional detachment is not cruelty, it's clarity. You finally see her patterns for what they are, not what you wish they were. And then, something incredible happens. You stop feeling anger toward her. You stop trying to make her see your worth. You stop needing her remorse. You start realizing that her treatment of you was never a reflection of your value. It was a reflection of her limitations. You begin to understand that closure doesn't come from her apology. It comes from your decision to stop explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Walking away isn't the end. It's the return. The return to your purpose, to your peace, to the man you were before love became survival. And once you feel that peace again, the kind that doesn't depend on her mood, her approval, or her attention, you'll never trade it for chaos again. Rebuilding starts quietly. There's no applause, no cinematic moment of victory. Just a man sitting in silence, learning how to breathe again without walking on eggshells. The first nights feel strange, not peaceful yet, just empty. You reach for your phone out of habit, then remember there's nothing to check. The absence feels like withdrawal, and in a way, it is. Because you weren't just attached to her, you were addicted to the emotional spikes, the adrenaline of fixing, pleasing, chasing. It takes time to detox from dysfunction, but the peace that replaces it will feel like truth returning home. Healing isn't about moving on, it's about moving inward. You start to realize how much of your identity was built around trying to earn love. You begin asking the questions you once avoided. Why did I stay? Why did I allow so much? Why was I afraid to leave? And as painful as those answers are, they become the foundation of your rebirth. You learn that love without respect starves a man. That compromise without balance kills admiration. That peace isn't something a woman gives you. It's something you protect with your boundaries. The world will tell you to find someone new, to get back out there, but rushing into another connection while your wounds are still bleeding only spreads the infection.
Real healing requires solitude. It requires remembering who you were before you bent yourself into something acceptable. It requires silence, not loneliness, but reflection. Because loneliness is empty time. Solitude is sacred time. It's the forge where men reclaim themselves. This is where your power starts to return. You start saying no again, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You stop explaining your decisions to people who don't deserve front row seats to your life. You rediscover the weight of your presence. You realize how much energy you once wasted trying to fix what should have been left broken. You start investing that energy into yourself, your health, your craft, your purpose. You stop looking for validation in her reaction and start finding it in your progress. And then something beautiful happens. Peace becomes your new standard. You stop chasing excitement that comes with instability. You stop confusing passion with volatility. You start seeing how calm, consistent, mutual respect feels like strength, not boredom. You understand now that love without peace isn't love, it's chaos wearing perfume. You begin to understand that walking away didn't make you cold, it made you clean. You're no longer carrying her chaos in your chest. You're breathing your own air again. You'll know you've healed when you no longer want her back. Not because you hate her, but because you finally see how small you had to become to stay. You'll look back and realize she wasn't your loss. You were hers. Because she'll never experience the version of you that rose from the wreckage. The man who learned that silence can speak louder than explanation. That dignity can be more seductive than desperation. That walking away can be the loudest "I love myself" you'll ever say. And when that realization settles, you'll never chase again. You'll never beg again. You'll never confuse your empathy with obligation again. Because once a man learns to walk away with peace in his eyes and no hate in his heart, he becomes untouchable. There comes a point when you stop telling the story of what she did and start telling the story of what you learned. The pain stops being an open wound and becomes wisdom stitched into your skin. You no longer see her as the villain. You see yourself as the man who finally learned to stop negotiating his worth. That's the real victory, not revenge, not replacement, but redemption. Because walking away isn't about proving her wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were always more than how she treated you.
You start realizing that everything you went through had a purpose. The betrayal taught you boundaries. The disrespect taught you dignity. The silence taught you self-control. Every time you thought you were breaking, you were actually being rebuilt. Pain is the universe's most honest teacher, and if you pay attention, it gives you something far greater than comfort. It gives you clarity, and clarity is the birth of power. The new version of you won't tolerate what the old version begged for. You'll stop mistaking chaos for chemistry. You'll stop romanticizing dysfunction. You'll stop trying to love people into their potential. Because now you know that real love doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't punish you for peace. It doesn't turn you into someone else just to stay. You'll walk into your next chapter calm, grounded, and unbothered. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you've learned the difference between connection and captivity. And if you're still in that confusion right now, if you're still holding on, still trying to make sense of it all, remember this: peace is the proof you made the right decision. When you can finally sit alone and feel relief instead of loneliness, when your mind stops replaying arguments, when your body finally relaxes for the first time in months, That's your confirmation. That's your soul whispering, you did the right thing. Walking away doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. It makes you the kind of man who refuses to let pain define him. It makes you dangerous, because now you can't be manipulated by guilt, or seduced by chaos, or enslaved by nostalgia. You've seen what losing yourself looks like, and you'll never go back. You'll start leading again, not just in relationships, but in life. You'll rebuild your purpose, your discipline, your focus. You'll become magnetic again, not because you're chasing anyone, but because you're finally living in alignment with yourself. So when it's time to finally walk away from a woman, do it with peace, do it with silence, do it with love for the man you're becoming. Don't argue, don't explain, don't try to win, just leave. Let her wonder how the man she underestimated became the one who never looked back. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is not proving your worth. It's becoming the proof that you never needed her to begin with. And if this message reached you at the right time, if something in your chest feels lighter, if the truth finally hit where denial used to live, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. There's a man out there tonight who needs to hear what you just did. Hit the like button, subscribe and support the channel through the link in the description, because every voice we awaken builds stronger men, stronger minds and stronger boundaries. Peace is power. Choose it.